Good morning. Days like this, you want to do very little, don't you? Seems like what they call a lazy dog day. Or, as I've told y'all before in my devotionals, we want to call it a snow day. Just take the day off, whatever. And I didn't plan it this way, but we're going to be in Jonah chapter 1. I say I didn't plan it this way. The Lord planned it this way. I want to talk about the storm. The storm. Y'all like storms? Donald does. I don't. It does make you appreciate the sunshine. You know, we are a shepherded people. We are not a sheltered people. We're going to go through storms. And this struck me the other day when I was preparing for this. It was a storm that brought us here. We were going through a spiritual storm, and then we were sitting at Applebee's one night, and the Lord sent a real storm. And that caused John and Kim to not be able to leave. And here we are. It's amazing. God, I believe God sent that storm there just for me that night. Do you hear what I'm saying? God sent that storm that night just for me. I'd been praying about the situation we were in. I needed some answers. A lot of times when I pray, I don't want a storm though. I like the sunshine and a cloud, maybe a small cloud in a blue sky. Jonah here is in the middle of a storm. Let's look here in verse 3. But Jonah rose up to flee unto Tarshish from the presence of the Lord, and went down to Joppa, and he found a ship going to Tarshish. So he paid the fare thereof, and went down into it to go with them to Tarshish from the presence of the Lord. But the Lord sent out a great wind into the sea, and there was a mighty tempest in the sea, so that the ship was likened to be broken. Then the mariners were afraid, and cried to every man unto his God, and cast forth the wares that were in the ship into the sea to lighten it of them. But Jonah was gone down into the sides of the ship, and he lay and was fast asleep. So the shipmaster came to him and said unto him, What meanest thou, O sleeper? Arise, call upon thy God, if so be that God will think upon us that we perish not. I want to ask you something. Do you think these mariners were experienced? You think they'd seen storms before? They knew something was different here, didn't they? They knew there was something more. This was not just your regular storm. That night, that storm blowed in up there when we were sitting there at Applebee's. I didn't think nothing of it. Did you? Kim, did you think anything of it? I didn't either at the time. A lot of times when we come through storms and come out of them, it's not that we get on the other side we realize why God sent that storm. He sent that storm just for me. I've told y'all about enduring the chastening of the Lord, and a lot of times that's a storm. When we're in storms, I think we need to reflect on, am I in this storm because of my disobedience, or am I in this storm because of my obedience? Job did nothing wrong. It says he was a righteous man and eschewed evil. Yet what did he have to endure? One of the worst storms of his life. Lost his children. Lost his possessions. Yet in that he said, I'm in the middle of this storm. Though he slay me, yet will I serve him. God sent this storm to correct Jonah. To correct him. So I want us to reflect. Listen, I told you I don't like storms. Can you plan anything in the middle of a storm? Yeah, how are you going to call the insurance company? I like the way Donald thinks. How do you make plans in the middle of a storm? Listen, we just endured that Hurricane Helene just barely 2 months ago. When that thing was raging, I wasn't doing much planning. I was doing a lot of praying. Sitting there in that living room recliner, me and Melissa. That's what those storms do. Look, why did God use a storm here? You ever thought about that? I mean, he could have broke the ship down before they left. He let them get out here in the middle of it, and he took over, didn't he? Man has no control over the weather. We like to think we do. That's the one thing God has maintained complete control over. He gave man dominion over the earth, not the weather. And God has always used weather to judge or discipline man. In the Old Testament, He would send droughts. Remember the 3.5 years. So I want us to reflect this morning when we're in storms and trials, or God has sent a storm our way, what's it for? When the storm's over, most things are not where they were before the storm, are they? And the storm causes us to get rid of things we don't. What did they do here? That said they lightened the ship. They got rid of stuff they didn't need. They got to praying. And what did they do next? In verse 7, and they said everyone to his fellow, come and let us cast lots, that we may know for who caused this evil is upon us. So they cast lots, and the lots fell upon Jonah. You know, he had to know when they pulled those out. I think he knew when he got up on deck what was going on. It says he did. Later on here we'll see that. See, even the casting of lots, we like to think it just so happened. Well, that was a random chance. You won't convince me that storm blowed in that night by random chance. George Winterling couldn't have called it any better. I don't know if y'all remember who George Winterling was. In Proverbs 16:33 it says, the lot is cast into the lap, but the whole disposing thereof is of the Lord. Listen, if God counted the very hairs on your head, don't you think He knows what storm you're in? Has He ever sent a storm that did not accomplish the purpose He sent it for? Did this storm here accomplish its purpose? Did it correct Jonah? Did that storm we endured that night? Listen, that was a little bit of an inconvenience, not much. I've been through worse. I think it disrupted John and it. John, I'm sorry that it disrupted y'all's schedule that night with my prayers. Yeah. And I've mentioned, and this goes along with what I've been telling y'all before, the Lord's been dealing with me about the chastening of the Lord. And how I didn't want to endure it. Listen, go to Mark chapter 4. Let's look at somebody else that didn't like a storm. These are here for our examples and for our exhortation. And I think we ought to learn to bear each other's burdens. Listen, if somebody else is going through a storm, we can help them weather it. Do y'all like to weather a storm alone or with company? Misery loves company, as the old saying goes. But here in Mark chapter 4, in verse 35, in the same day when even was come, He saith unto them, this is Jesus talking to the disciples, let us pass over unto the other side. And when they had sent out away the multitude, they took Him even as He was in the ship, and there were also with Him other little ships. And there arose a great storm of wind, and the waves beat into the ship, so that it was now full. And He was in the hinder part of the ship, asleep on a pillow. And they wake Him and said, Master, carest thou not that we perish? Here's clay when I'm in the middle of a storm. Lord, just get me out of it. Lord, I don't want to learn why this is here. I don't want to learn if I've got myself into this storm, or if this is you sending the storm to remove stuff out of my life, or to cause me to focus on you and pray more, or get rid of this flesh more. No, Lord, Master, don't you care that we perish? I remember in March when COVID broke, they sent us home from Jessup. And I'd watched the news. It looked like the whole world was in a panic, and it was. And I found myself praying kind of that, Master, carest thou not that we perish? And the very thing came to me that's in these next few verses. And He arose and rebuked the wind and said unto the sea, Peace, be still. And the wind ceased, and there was a great calm. But watch what He says here in verse 40. And He said to them, Why are ye so fearful? How is it that ye have no faith? No faith. You know why I get fearful during the storms, or why I want out of the storm I'm in? I don't have any. Listen, if Jesus was sitting there asleep in the boat, why were they scared? My boat has never sank. The storms I've had to weather in my life, I've come out on the other side of them. And I'm a better person for them. I've endured that chastening, sometimes kicking and screaming. Because I'm still wrapped in this carcass of flesh that when I would do good, as the brothers reminded us, evil is ever present. And Jesus has to ask me, the faith I give you, why is it you don't have it? What have you done with it? Did I weather the storm? So I want to challenge us this week. Listen, Monday morning's coming. I'm going to go ahead and predict some storms. And I'm preaching this to my own hurt. Because guess what's coming Monday? Some storms. I had one this morning, so to speak. They woke me up at 4 o'clock. I'd a whole lot rather slept in. But I reflected and I thought, this is what the Lord has for me. I'm going to look for the good in it. I could be unemployed. That'd be a real typhoon, wouldn't it? Count your many blessings. Name them one by one. Ride that storm out. Brother Harold, I think of the storm you endured there just a few months ago. I told you I'd wrote you off. I figured your ship was going to go down because of my lack of faith. What, have you no faith? We were praying. God answered our prayer. But at the time, the storm was too great. You see where I'm going with this? The storm was too great. Most of the time, we just want to give up. Demas hath forsaken me, having loved this present world. He wanted out and he got out. He didn't want no more of the storms. He went there with them on that first mission trip with Paul and them, and he was done. And you know what's even sadder about that? There's no correction. Is he ever mentioned again? Let's weather the storms. I love y'all. May the Lord bless you in the coming week.